Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. My name is Alan Kiesler, and we are continuing our class on extraterrestrial spirituality, talking about the nature of God and the aspect of God within our hearts, the thought adjusters, as they are called in the Urantia book. And I'm going to continue what I've been doing for the last few days, reading a little bit from the Urantia book about the thought adjusters, and then making some comments on them. And as usual, I am in the place where the Urantia book talks about the Universal Father, for reasons as I've explained before, so that to prevent any misunderstanding, I'm using the word Allah for that term. So this is now in paper 108 of the Urantia book, entitled The Mission and Ministry of the Thought Adjusters. Maybe I'll just give a little bit of a review, a background of what the thought adjusters are and why we speak about them in the plural. Because the thought adjusters are God in our hearts. They are Allah. They are God for all practical purposes as far as we are concerned. Of course, Allah is only one, and the thought adjusters are many, perhaps an infinite number, we don't know. But in any case, there are many. And those thought adjusters are, as we're going to be reading more about today, individual. They are individuals, but they are practically equal to Allah. That is, they are omniscient, they know practically everything, omnipotent, they can do practically whatever they want, and omnipresent, they exist practically everywhere. But it's a little difficult for us. It was explained, as I explained earlier, this is called the mystery of mysteries. How is it possible that Allah, the supreme source of everything, the absolute infinite intelligence, or intelligent infinity, as the law of one calls Allah, how can that infinity, that source of everything, come and live within our hearts? That is very, very great mystery. It's really beyond our ability to understand. But, as I've explained previously, if we simply hear about this incredible information about how the thought adjuster relates to Allah, and how the thought adjuster relates to us, and how we actually, as we become more and more God conscious, as we become more and more surrendered to the will of God, that means as we become better and better Muslims, then gradually we and God within our hearts become one. We merge into one reality, one new being, which is very, very astonishing information for me. It was so shocking when I first read that. But then it explained to me, it resolved for me this conflict that I had had for many, many years, because I had studied Sufis who talked about the oneness of man and God, how the human being in perfection becomes one with God. But on the other hand, I felt it's impossible for the finite human to become totally one with the infinite Allah. And how could that be? So this information from the Urantia book solved that problem for me. That is, it explained how Allah resides in our heart in the form of the thought adjusters, and we become totally one in every way with the thought adjusters when we become perfect in surrender to God. And Allah remains Himself, the original individual, the original source of everything, the original conscious being who is infinite and all-pervading, and all existence is within Allah. So the thought adjusters are, as we're going to be reading a little bit more, practically they are Allah. They are, as far as we're concerned, in our relationship with them, they are like God to us. But they are still, in some sense, different from Allah, because Allah is one, and the thought adjusters are many, are infinite. And Allah remains forever only, maybe I shouldn't say only, but Allah remains as the original source of everything in His supreme paradise, whereas the thought adjusters, as we're going to be reading a little more today, and as I explained earlier, they come from their original spiritual source, their spiritual place called Divinity, to our universe, or they go to all the different universes and indwell the hearts of mortal creatures. So that is a great mystery how that happens. Okay, enough for a background. Now I'm going to read a little from the Urantia book. The mission of the thought adjusters the mission of the thought adjusters to the human races is to represent, to be Allah to the mortal creatures of time and space. That is the fundamental work of the divine gifts. Here the word divine gifts is another term that's being used for the thought adjusters. Their mission is also that of elevating the mortal minds and of translating the immortal souls of men up to the divine heights and spiritual levels of paradise perfection. And in the experience of thus transforming the human nature of the temporal creature into the divine nature of the eternal finaliter, the adjusters bring into existence a unique type of being, a being consisting in the eternal union of the perfect adjuster and the perfected creature, which it would be impossible to duplicate by any other universe technique. So this is amazing. To me, this is absolutely incredible. But this is the fact, as we're being taught. This is what our extraterrestrial sources are telling us. This author of this paper is the same individual who was the author of the last paper that we were reading from, a solitary messenger. That is one of those very, very elevated spiritual beings who travels throughout existence alone and can go, practically anywhere, and helps in different universes, gives assistance as a unique type of individual with very, very great knowledge and very, very great compassion as a teacher. So this paper is said to have been presented to us by that solitary messenger. And he is explaining here more about the nature of the thought adjusters. And in this paragraph, which we've just read, he has repeated this point very beautifully. Everything he writes is so beautiful. His language is so beautiful. He explains how, I love this wording that he uses, in the experience of transforming the human nature of the temporal creature into the divine nature of the eternal finaliter. So this word is not an English word that we're familiar with, but the finaliter means the mortal being, the creature who is reached the final stage of perfection and becomes eternal in that relationship with the thought adjuster. So how is it possible for us, human beings, to become divine? It's amazing. But the adjusters are responsible for that. They are our indwelling guides. They live in our hearts, and they help us. They guide us. They give us encouragement and strength to come into a ultimate stage of perfection as a finaliter. And this solitary messenger writes, by this process, the adjusters bring into existence a unique type of being, a being consisting in the eternal union of the perfect adjuster. The adjuster is always perfect, and the perfected creature. So the adjuster is, for all practical purposes, as far as we're concerned, Allah. The adjuster is God. But, of course, not one. That one eternal Allah lives perpetually in the perfect paradise, and we are imperfect. We are created imperfect. And gradually, over a long spiritual development, we become perfect. And that is really what the adjuster enables us to do by his guidance, or by its guidance. And then the final phrase here, it would be impossible to duplicate this creation of the united adjuster and soul, individual mortal creature. It would be impossible to create or to duplicate this by any other universe technique. So this is really incredible, amazing. But that's how this works. The adjuster guides us to become perfect, and then we totally become united with, become merged with, we become one with the adjuster, and we become a new type of being, unique type of being. All right, I'm going to continue reading. Nothing in the entire universe can substitute for the fact of experience on non-existential levels. The infinite God is, as always, replete and complete, infinitely inclusive of all things, except evil and creature experience. God cannot do wrong, he is infallible. God cannot experientially know what he has never personally experienced. God's pre-knowledge is existential. Therefore does the Spirit of Allah descend from paradise to participate with finite mortals in every bona fide experience of the ascending career. It is only by such a method that the existential God could become in truth and in fact man's experiential God. So God exists eternally, but we experience God through this presence of the adjuster. The infinity of the eternal God encompasses the potential for finite experience, which indeed becomes actual in the ministry of the adjuster fragments that actually share the life vicissitude experiences of human beings. So this, my friends, this is an amazing idea. And how is it that God, who is infinite and who includes everything, can experience being with us, you can say. And because we have free will, we literally can choose things, what we want to do or not. That is our free will. Therefore, God, who exists existentially, that is, God exists eternally from the beginning to the end in completion in terms of existence. But in terms of experience, God experiences our living. God experiences our suffering. God experiences our elation, our happiness when we progress spiritually. God experiences everything that we experience through and in the thought adjuster. So this is another wonderful explanation about something that really is practically impossible for us to understand otherwise. How is it possible that the infinite God experiences along with us our suffering? God is eternally perfect and above all suffering, but God comes into our hearts and lives with us in our hearts as the thought adjuster. So that is the explanation of this mystery. Of course, it's still a mystery how God does that, but with the explanation or the understanding about the existence of God in our heart as the thought adjuster, then we begin to appreciate these things a lot more. Okay, I'm just going to continue reading a little bit more. The next section is about the selection and assignment of the thought adjusters. And this is just amazing information. When adjusters are dispatched for mortal service from Divinington, if you weren't here in the previous class, Divinington is the spiritual planet or the spiritual universe, the spiritual world, where thought adjusters come from. So when they are dispatched for mortal service from Divinington, they are identical in the endowment of existential divinity, but they vary in experiential qualities proportional to previous contact in and with evolutionary creatures. So the thought adjusters are all originally identical in terms of their existence. But when they come into the material universes and they exist in the hearts of mortal creatures, then they gain experience. And according to that experience, each adjuster learns things or experiences things, and the other adjusters have not gone through that experience, even though they're all, in one sense, infinite, but still they have their individuality. So this is something also wonderful and amazing, that God in our hearts is an experiencer of what we experience individually. Each thought adjuster, each aspect of God in each individual heart of each person has an individual experience with that person. Therefore, the different adjusters, even though in terms of their existence and original is identical, as they experience being within the hearts of individual creatures and they share those experiences, they develop differential experience. I'm going to read on. We cannot explain the basis of adjuster assignment, but we conjecture that these divine gifts are bestowed in accordance with some wise and efficient policy of eternal fitness, of adaptation to the indwelt personality. We do observe that the more experienced adjuster is often the indweller of the higher type of human mind. Human inheritance must therefore be a considerable factor in determining selection and assignment. So as this solitary messenger says, this is, it's beyond our understanding. It's even beyond the understanding of this thought adjuster. He can't really explain everything, but he conjectures, he guesses, you can say, that this must be the way it is. So there is some interesting feature here that an adjuster who has had more experience is more often selected to indwell a higher type of human mind. So I'm going to read on. Although we do not definitely know, we firmly believe that all thought adjusters are volunteers. But before ever they volunteer, they are in possession of full data respecting the candidate for indwelling. Isn't this amazing? Again, this solitary messenger says he doesn't know for sure. But his conviction is, he firmly believes, that all thought adjusters are volunteers. That is, they are individuals, although they are all, each and every one of them is, as far as we're concerned, God, is the infinite God. But still, they have their individual free will, and just like Allah has total absolute free will, the thought adjusters also have incredible free will, and they choose. They make their own choice. They volunteer, in other words, to become the God in our hearts. And they actually choose who they will indwell. They make a voluntary decision. So I'm going to read a little more. The seraphic drafts of ancestry and projected patterns of life conduct are transmitted via paradise to the reserve corps of adjusters on Divinington by the reflectivity technique extending inward from the capitals of the local universes to the headquarters of the super-universes. This forecast covers not only the hereditary antecedents of the mortal candidate, but also the estimate of probable intellectual endowment and spiritual capacity. The adjusters thus volunteer to indwell minds of whose intimate natures they have been fully apprised. So, just to explain that a little bit, the thought adjusters get the full information about us. Our hereditary, that is our ancestors, what they have been like, and therefore what we are probably going to be like. They estimate our probable intellectual endowment, our spiritual capacity. So the adjusters know all of this before, and then they on that data, with that information, they make the decision if they will volunteer to dwell with us in our hearts. This is so amazing to me, but isn't it amazing to you too? I bet it is. So, going on, the volunteering adjuster is particularly interested in 3 qualifications of the human candidate. 1, intellectual capacity. Is the mind normal? What is the intellectual potential, the intelligence capacity? Can the individual develop into a bona fide will creature? Will wisdom have an opportunity to function? So that's the first qualification of the human candidate that they look at, is intelligence or intellectual capacity. The second one is, number 2, spiritual perception. The prospects of reverential development, the birth and growth of the religious nature. What is the potential of soul, the probable spiritual capacity of receptivity? So, secondly, to what extent will this human being likely be receptive to the spiritual guidance of the adjuster? They look at that before they decide to come into our hearts. And then the third, number 3, is combined intellectual and spiritual powers. The degree to which these 2 endowments may possibly be associated, combined, so as to produce strength of human character and contribute to the certain evolution of an immortal soul of survival value. So this is amazing, that the intellectual capacity and the spiritual capacity, these 2, both separately and together, combined together, will determine the degree to which we will be of good human character, strong human character, and can evolve into a eternal soul. That's, as the Urantia book explains, the human soul, you could say, or the human individual has the opportunity to become eternal. It's not eternal by nature, eternal in the past or eternal in the future. But if the human being surrenders to God's guidance, is able to receive the guidance of the thought adjuster in the heart, then it can become an eternal soul. But if we reject the guidance of God, if we refuse to surrender to God, then what is maybe called going to hell, it really means eventually we lose all opportunity to become an eternal soul. It's a sad state, but it's true, evidently, as far as we know from the information we're getting here, that that's the real hell, is when we fail to attain eternal survival by refusing to accept the guidance we're being given by the thought adjuster and by other sources of divine guidance and information like prophets and scriptures. Okay, I'm just going to read on a little bit more. With these facts before them, it is our belief that the monitors, that's the thought adjusters, freely volunteer for assignment. Probably more than one adjuster volunteers. Perhaps the surviving personalized orders select from this group of volunteering adjusters the one best suited to the task of spiritualizing and eternalizing the personality of the mortal candidate. In the assignment and service of the adjusters, the sex of the creature is of no consideration. So it makes no difference, a man or a woman. The adjusters simply look at the spiritual potential and the intellectual potential of the soul, not of the soul, of the human being, and that gives them some idea of what the likelihood is that that creature will be able to become eternal, become a candidate for uniting with and merging with the thought adjuster and becoming that new amazing eternal creation, which is our goal, to become that. And I think I'll just read one more section here. The short time intervening between the volunteering and the actual dispatch of the adjuster is presumably spent in the Divinington schools of the personalized monitors, where a working pattern of the waiting mortal mind is utilized in instructing the assigned adjuster as to the most effective plans for personality approach and mind spiritization. This mind model is formulated through a combination of data supplied by the superuniverse reflectivity service. At least this is our understanding. A belief which we hold as a result of putting together information secured by contact with many personalized adjusters throughout the long universal careers of the solitary messengers. So this information, as we explained in a previous class, is very, very difficult to come by, to understand the adjusters. But the solitary messengers have relationship with the personalized adjusters. That is, the thought adjusters are originally not persons. They're impersonal. Not impersonal, really. They're pre-personal. So they are sort of in an intermediary stage, you might say, between personal and impersonal. They are in a pre-personal phase of their existence. So the adjusters then become personalized once they merge with a evolutionary creature, or once Allah makes that decision to make them personalized. So both of those things happen. So in any case, however they may have become personalized, then those personalized adjusters are available to the solitary messengers. They can communicate with them, whereas the pre-personal ones are beyond that sort of communication. But due to long experience with personalized adjusters, this solitary messenger, who we are hearing this information from, says that he, and I guess the other solitary messengers, because the solitary messengers seem to have full intercommunication with each other, sort of telepathy, at least with the solitary messengers in their universe, as I recall. So this is how they get their information, otherwise which would be unavailable to us. And then one final point, this is very interesting. Frankly, I don't quite understand this myself, but I'm going to read. When once the adjusters are actually dispatched from Divinington, practically no time intervenes between that moment and the hour of their appearance in the minds of their chosen subjects. The average transit time of an adjuster from Divinington to Urantia, that is to our planet, is 117 hours, 42 minutes, and 7 seconds. That's in Earth time. So this is the average time. It takes several days, in other words, of our time. But then he explains here, virtually all of this time is occupied with registration on Uversa. Uversa is the capital of our super universe. So the Divinington source, the thought adjuster leaves from Divinington. It takes very little time for him to reach, or for it to reach to Uversa, to the capital of the super universe where he is assigned, or where it is assigned, and then traveling from Uversa to Earth, to Urantia, takes very little time also. Most of the time, it does take some time for him or it to get registered on the super universe headquarters, and altogether this time, from the time of leaving Divinington, that is the adjuster's home planet or home universe, to arrival on the Earth is 117 hours, 42 minutes, so that's like about 4 days, I guess. All right, that's enough for this. I'll go on reading this. So Shehzadawan, I just see, what book is this from, sir? This is from the Urantia book. Urantia. I have previously written the source of this information, the Urantia book, which was received, I guess is the best word, between 1925 and 1935 by a group of individuals in Chicago in the United States. And the way it happened was, there was a psychiatrist who had a patient who was having some problems, I guess sleeping at night or whatever. During his sleep he was writing, I guess. And he wrote all these things, and they thought he was crazy first, but after studying him, they realized there's some very interesting information, and after some studying they realized we should find out more about this, so they found out they could ask questions, and they could present questions, and they would get answers. So that was how this book came into existence, a number of papers, and then they were finally published in, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was about 1953 or 1955, after many years of studying and editing, and finally it was published as the Urantia book. All right, so let's see what other questions or comments we have here. Shehzad Nawad says, Alan, prayers and blessings from Calgary, Alberta. Thank you very much. David Wagner says, I love how you demonstrate the incredible powers of human imagination. I'd never be able to imagine what people can believe in the face of rational impossibility. You are on the wings of the curve of normality. Great. Well, this is incredible information, really. Whether it is human imagination, or whether it's the imagination or experience and conclusion of some extraterrestrial being, that each one of us will have to choose, whether we want to think this is just human imagination. Personally, I've studied this for 25 years, and in the beginning I also was very unable to accept this as anything real, because it's really incredible. How could anybody know the sorts of things that are being told us here? It just seems impossible. But as I studied it, just as that original group of human beings in Chicago, I don't remember all their names right now, but they're available. If you look up Urantia book, do a search, you will find the names of those individuals who were responsible for receiving this information through that anonymous person. They've never revealed the name of that man who, I think it was a man, could have been a woman maybe, but who when sleeping was giving this information and had no recollection. That person had no recollection when he woke up in the morning. So it, if it came from his imagination, he didn't understand it. But this group of people became convinced it was impossible for him to be creating all of this information out of his imagination. And after many years of studying, I became convinced, no, this is genuine information coming from some extraterrestrial beings who have a lot more knowledge than we do, a lot better understanding of what is happening in not only our universe, but they describe other universes, and they describe the spiritual world, which is full of spiritual universes also. And as I have explained before, I was fortunate to be able to actually go there. Maybe that was my imagination, David Wagner would say. But I don't think it was imagination. I experienced just as much as I experience anything in this world. And so I got a personal confirmation that that information about the spiritual universes in the Urantia book is true. I experienced it myself. I saw it with my own eyes. So that's your judgment, if you want to call it imagination. But I don't find it imagination. I find it, in fact, very, very rational. Not, as David says here, what people can believe in the face of rational impossibility. This is not at all impossible. In fact, for me, this is the best explanation of many mysteries and many questions that I had all my life about very deep spiritual questions, such as how can God, the original source of everything, be present within our hearts? How can the infinite, unlimited consciousness be present as an individual within our hearts? Because we experience that. At least, if we're fortunate, we're able to hear the voice of our conscience. We're able to get guidance from God within our heart, and we can experience that reality. So this is not imagination. This is certainly not rational impossibility. This is highly rational, and not only for me highly probable, but factual. So thank you for the comment, David. I appreciate that, but I disagree with you on that. So what book is this? Urantia. Urantia book. Okay, Aman Sarwar is asking, if a person do good deeds, love others, feel the difference between right and wrong, feel guilty if he did something wrong, but do not interest much in prayers and worshipping to Allah, what thought adjuster think about that kind of person? How much he likely to be loved and liked by God in our heart? Well, first let me say that I don't think there's any sort of discrimination in terms of loving and liking. The thought adjusters love everyone equally. But they will select an individual to indwell according to the likelihood that that person will become worthy of and capable of becoming totally united with the adjuster. Because the adjuster wants to become totally united with a mortal being, just as we develop spiritually, we want to become one with God. We want to become perfect. That's our natural nature, is to want to become perfect. So, but to answer your question, if a person does good deeds but does not worship Allah, does not pray, what will the adjuster think? Well, I'm certain that the adjuster doesn't care very much about the rituals, the religious beliefs of a person. The ritual is not very important. What's important is the intent and the sincerity of the heart and the love that one develops. So whether or not one is very religious is not so important. What is important is that the person is sincere to search for the truth and to find the truth and to accept the guidance of the adjuster. That is a result of sincerity. If we're sincere, if we're thoughtful, we will gradually come to understand that we are getting good guidance in our hearts from the thought adjuster or from God in our hearts. And that is what's important to the adjuster. So it's not so much important whether the person is religious. What's important is if the person is spiritual to the adjuster. And even if the person's not spiritual, they're not going to be loved any less, but they might be less likely to receive the indwelling of the thought adjuster. Okay. This is an Urdu poem, I guess. It's a little hard for me to read. I don't have my glasses with me to read the Persian script here, but I think it is Jahan se, no, Jo yahan se kahin na jata tha, Jo yahan se kahin na jata tha, wo yahan se chala kiya ne चला किया न कहीं वो यहाँ से चला किया न कहीं. Okay, so I think that means who from here doesn't go anywhere, that person from here didn't go anywhere. I'm sorry if I'm mistranslating that, but sorry, I'm not fluent in Urdu as I am in English, and I couldn't quite translate that perfectly, but all right, we'll just see there are a few hellos and thank yous, and here's Miriam Bande saying, Rumi says, Allah is like the ocean, and all the creatures in the ocean are living and breathing the ocean. So it's not difficult for Allah to exist everywhere. So the concept of thought adjuster could be what we call the soul, which is Allah's nur in all of us. Yes, that's possible. This word soul can have two very distinct meanings. One is the thought adjuster. So the light of God, or the nur Allah, within us can be called the thought adjuster. Yes, I think that's a very good point. What we may call the soul, but I would call it the super soul. There are two souls. I've explained this before. There's the super soul, that is the thought adjuster, that is God present in our heart. And then there is us, our soul, which is an individual, which is not equal to Allah in the same way the thought adjuster is equal to Allah. Thought adjuster is not equal to Allah in every way, but practically is equal to Allah, is the presence of Allah in our heart. So that's the nur of Allah. Yes, I like that very much. So that soul, that super soul, is the thought adjuster, which is the light of Allah in us. Very nice point. Thank you very much. I would agree with you. Shehzad Awan, जो यहाँ से कहीं न जाता था. Okay. All right. Zainab Arshad, much respect your way. Thank you. All right. So I think maybe I'll wait and see for another minute or two if anybody has any other comment or question. But I thank you all very, very much for listening and for your comments. And I'm just going to summarize one or 2 points and then we'll end this class. The main point that we've learned here is more details about the thought adjusters, specifically how God in our hearts makes the decision to come into our hearts. In other words, it's not just random, it's not just for everyone equally. The thought adjusters make an individual decision. They volunteer to indwell the minds of those creatures who they think have a good chance for becoming one with them. And then they do everything they can to help us succeed in that evolution to perfection. So this is amazing how the adjusters are also in some way individuals, although it may be impossible for us to really understand that. That's really the case. That's how it's explained here. The thought adjusters are individuals, even though they are also God. And each adjuster is an individual, and each adjuster experiences the experiences of those people that they indwell, those creatures into whose hearts they come. And they look to see who they want to indwell. So that what that means is the thought adjusters are not automatically present in the heart of every single creature as soon as they come into existence. At a certain stage of evolution, we may get a thought adjuster, and then that thought adjuster will give us guidance from within. We'll get a spiritual guidance. So that means some people aren't getting that sort of guidance the way more spiritually developed people do. And that's why some people find it very strange that people say, oh, God is talking to me. Some people say that, God is talking to me in my heart. Prophets always say that. God is speaking to me, because the prophets definitely always have a thought adjuster indwelling them, who then gives them the perfect guidance they need for their mission. But not every single person automatically has a thought adjuster in them. It is a choice, a voluntary choice of the thought adjuster to indwell that person. And when that happens, then that spiritual evolution of that soul, becoming one with the adjuster, begins. All right, Miriam Bunde asks, so it's the concept of the observer and the observed inside us, like Eckhart Tolle says. I'm not familiar with this statement of Eckhart Tolle. I've heard of him, but I've not read much of his writings. But yes, it seems exactly what you're saying. There is an observer within us, and there is an observed within us. So, although either word could apply to either, there are two observers within us. That is us, our individual identity, and the supersoul, the individual soul and the supersoul. The mortal, evolutionary, evolving individual, and the thought adjuster. So both are observing what is going on, and both can be observed by the other. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean, which is the observer and which is the observed, but there are within us both these souls, the Nur Allah, the light of Allah, and the fragment, the large fragment, you could say, the super soul, which is a fragment of Allah, and then there's the tiny soul, that is our individual identity. So both are within us, both are observing, though not only one is observing. Shehzanawad, please make a universal dua for all of us, please. Allah, 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 Allah. I am doing a dua for all beings, especially everyone who's listening to this. I am praying that you will understand this very wonderful information. That's the best prayer I can do for you all, is to pray that you will be able to understand this. It's not easy. Some of this information is very, very difficult for some people to accept. But if we have an adjuster indwelling in us, that adjuster will help us to accept, understand the truth. And so that's, I'm praying for all of you that you will be able to understand this. Okay. Thank you all very much. Miriam says thank you and salams. Thank you to you too, Miriam, and to Shehzad, and to all of you who have made comments. Thank you. Okay. Peace be with you. We will meet again in 3 days at the same time, God willing. Actually, that's Thanksgiving here, 3 days from now. So there may be, I'm not sure exactly if I'll be able to give the class. It depends on where I am and who I'm with. I may have to postpone it, but I'll let you know in advance if I do. Otherwise, Thursday evening, Thanksgiving evening at 6 p.m. in California, which is Friday morning, 7 a.m. in Pakistan. Peace.